It's my pleasure to welcome everyone to the installation of Dr. J. Mizgerd as the Jerome S. Brody, MD Professor of Pulmonary Medicine. And all of you know, because I say this every time we install a new professor, that other than graduation, really the professorship installations are one of the most joyous times in academia during the year. Maybe matriculation and graduation. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Mizgerd's family and guests. His father, Joseph D. Mizgerd. Would you kind of stand up and be at or?
He's remote. He's on Zoom.
Okay. Terrific. Okay. And Dr. Brody's family and guests. But first of all, Dr. Brody, it's terrific to see you again. And we're delighted that you're here. So, and Davnos, his wife, Dr.
Yes, right
yes, his brother, Alan Brody. Good to meet you. His daughter, Karen Brody, I just met you. Yes, terrific. And the daughter, Dr. Lisa Brody. Welcome. And daughter and her partner, Marion Brody and Donald Ziegler. Great to see you too. And welcome to Boston University. And the grandson, Eli Mitchell. We have him on Zoom.
No, he's here.
Okay. Leo Weintraub and Emmanuel Salvati. Okay, good, terrific. And are you the parents of? They didn't put her, they didn't give me. David Weintraub and Benny Damasino. Perfect. And Camille Davnos and Biff Smith. Welcome to Boston University School of Medicine too. Robert Muchwa. Oh, he couldn't come. Okay. But is he on Zoom? No. Oh, okay. I'd like to recognize Dr. Aaron Shabanian, my predecessor and BU president of the school dean emeritus. If he's on Zoom, perhaps we can highlight Dr. Shabanian as well. And I want you all to feel comfortable putting any comments in the chat box. Usually the chat box has lots of congratulatory joy in it as we go through these professorships. So it's HR, I'll have to take it. I'd like to welcome Dr. David Coleman, who will introduce the speakers. And I'll be right back.
Thank you, Dean Antman. I'd like to join with Dean Antman in welcoming all of you to this really wonderful celebration. This is a very special moment for all of us, and we feel so fortunate to be able to have members of the family and so many people joining us on Zoom today with the induction of Dr. J. Mizgerd as the Jerome S. Brody Professor of Medicine. Distance here. Professorships are a very important part of the way that we acknowledge people in our environment who have been really meaningful and important elements of the character of our department and our institution. They're also very important for giving us a chance to honor these individuals, to say thank you to these individuals, and to memorialize these individuals. Today, we do so with Dr. Jerry Brody, and we will hear much more in the events to follow. But I will say that Dr. Brody, through his over 2 decades as leader of the Pulmonary Center here at the School of Medicine and as professor of medicine in our department, made indelible contributions to the many people that he inspired, to the individuals that he mentored, And the way that he helped all of us think differently about what's possible in our professional lives and in our individual lives as clinicians, investigators, and teachers. And it is that personal connection that all of us feel with Jerry Brody. It is this moment, this day, this time, this professorship, such enormous weight as we think about being able to join together and to really celebrate the legacy and the example of Jerry Brody. Today, we also are able to honor and recognize Dr. J. Mizgerd, current director of the Pulmonary Center and professor of medicine. Dr. Mizgerd has made very important contributions over the years, not only as a mentor of innumerable undergraduate, graduate students, postdocs, and junior faculty, but in helping us understand how the lung responds to injury, how inflammatory responses are influenced by immune responses, and has helped us better understand how we can mobilize changes in immune responses to afford therapeutic benefit. But like Dr. Brody, Dr. Mizgerd is extraordinarily generous. He must serve on more committees than anyone I know. He has a really remarkable generosity that I think all of us who work with him have benefited from. And he is a remarkably insightful scientist and a wonderful role model for all of us. So today we get to celebrate what's arguably best in our profession and in academic medicine. And we get to also celebrate the fact that we've all been touched by Jerry Brody and Jay Mizgerd in ways that we will always remember. So I'm particularly excited about our establishment of this professorship and the induction of Jay Mizgerd as the first Jerome S. Brody Professor of Medicine. So I will turn now to introduce Dr. Avi Spira, who will speak more about Dr. Brody. Dr. Spira, as many of you know, is the Alexander Graham Bell Professor of Medicine. He is chief of the section of computational biomedicine, and he is also leading the Johnson & Johnson lung cancer initiative here at Boston University. He's an extraordinary investigator. His life has been very meaningfully touched as well by Dr. Brody, and I'm delighted that Avi could speak with us today. Avi, thank you.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, Karen. Can everyone hear me out there? Wave, someone, you're good. We got some motion. It's good.
They said that there's a lot of background noise in the chat. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that.
Not that I am aware of. I will go back up to the presentation.
Yes, just be really quiet.
I'll try to be really quiet. Except me, got it. So let me first say good afternoon, everyone, and I can't tell you how meaningful it is to be standing up here today to honor Jerry and introduce him for this chair. A lot of emotions are running through me right now, Jerry, and I'm glad I get a chance to talk about them. That's the way my wife's taught me. I got to talk about my emotions. So, today. Let me first of all start with gratitude and thank Karen and Dave for making this chair possible. I know how hard it is to get a chair, and I doubt if the family appreciates the magnitude of what's happening here today. It is a huge deal. And I'm incredibly grateful to Karen and Dave for doing that. And to Jay and David Center, the heads of Pulmonary here, who advocated for this for a long, long time and established a lectureship for Jerry every year, which is phenomenal, and now led to this chair. And I know all of you in the Pulmonary Center out there in the cloud contributed. A lot of folks contributed a lot to make this chair possible. So from the bottom of my heart, thanks to all of you. My role is to talk a little bit about Jerry's impact on the institution and on me in particular. And he's touched a lot of people, as Dave said, but I would argue, other than his family, nobody's been touched more than me. And let me first start with the institution, Joe. Jerry actually came here, I learned this yesterday, in 1973. So that's, I can't even do the math. That's like 50, almost 50 years ago. I was 2 years old. So much of Jerry's tenure here at BU was without me here. And so I really want to invite others online or in the room who knew Jerry back then. I know there's some time at the end, Dave was saying, for them to speak about the impact he had. I'll just share a few things that David Center shared with me that I didn't know. Number one, I don't know if Ann knew this, Jerry wanted to be a cardiologist. I did not know that. Shame on you. I always thought you were a pulmonologist. He didn't get into the residency of his choice, so he ended up in pulmonary. And what I also didn't know is in 1973, he made a very risky and rash move to quit his day job at the University of Pennsylvania. He had a fight apparently with someone over there. And he literally quit his job in academia. Nobody quits their job in academia. And he happened to know Gordon Snyder, who was over here, and Gordon happened to have an opening for the head of pulmonary at Boston City Hospital, and the rest is history, right? Look what the pulmonary section and the pulmonary center have become nationally, internationally, because of Jerry. The programs that he launched, the vision that he had the first T32 in pulmonary medicine. I think the year 1975 is what I was told. All of us, including me, were on that training ground at one point or other. It's still active today. That's a legacy. That's an amazing legacy. He had the first program project grant in lung epithelial development. I don't know what year, so Jay or David will have to weigh in, but a long, long time ago, that program launched the careers of many who are online today. All of regenerative medicine under Darryl really starts back then with that program project grant, probably in the 70s or 80s. Amazing. He started a journal for basic science of pulmonary medicine. That's still alive today. It's we call it the Red Journal, right, Jerry? That was you. Now listen to that. Better. This will matter today. He created Evans Day, the Department of Medicine Research Day, when he was vice chair. I did not know that. We want to change it to Jerry's Day, but I'm not quite there yet. But we're going to get there. We're going to get there. But what I want to really focus my remarks on today is not the impact on the institution and all those programs and journals, but the impact on people that Jerry's had. I am a drop in the ocean in terms of the hundreds and hundreds of trainees, faculty, staff that Jerry has touched very deeply over a long period of time. They're all over the world right now, whose careers were shaped by Jerry. So I'll share you my story real quick because I think it's illustrative. I'm the rule, not the exception, illustrative of what Jerry has done as a leader and the people he's touched. So I was going to ask you questions, Jerry, but I'm not going to embarrass you. I'm going to ask you when we first met. My wife always said, we first met in the year 2000. I was a pulmonary fellow, first-year fellow on the clinical service. This is when they still let Jerry take care of patients. Very dark ages, right? And I meshed with him right away. I remember meeting you on the floor at Boston City Hospital, and it was love at first sight. And a few months later, I was transitioning from being a clinical fellow to doing research in the lab, and I was lost. So I went to Jerry's office. This is July of 2000. Jerry, I don't know if you remember this. And I asked for guidance, and you asked me a question, one question. What do you want to do with the rest of your life? Remember my answer, Jerry? I wanted to go back to Canada. I grew up in Montreal, practice critical care medicine, save a few lives, make a few bucks, live the Canadian dream, I told you. That was my goal. And remember your answer? I've got a better idea for you. And he threw a paper across his desk that was published in Science 6 months earlier, where for the first time, people had taken a new technology called microarrays, technology to measure thousands of genes at once. And for the first time ever, applied it to clinical samples to distinguish two kinds of leukemia that are difficult for us to distinguish clinically. And remember this, Jerry? You were so excited about this paper. You believed this was going to change the practice of medicine. And the missing ingredient, Jerry, a physician who could analyze vast amounts of data that were coming off the platform. And his punchline was, he had a drinking buddy in the College of Engineering who was starting the first graduate program in a new field of bioinformatics. And he said, why don't you go over there and do a master's degree? I remember walking out of the room saying, bioinfo, what? What is he talking about? And I went and talked to every faculty in the Pulmonary Center, and nah, he's crazy, crazy. The exception, David Center. I went into David's office, you remember this, David? And I asked, remember the question I asked you? Is Jerry crazy, or is this the greatest idea ever? Your answer, David, it was a classic answer.
Yes, the both.
Yeah. He said, they're not mutually exclusive. And he said, this is a great idea. And I went over there, and the rest is history for me. You know, I came back in 2003 to the medical center, and Jerry came up with a second big idea, was why don't we take this computational genomic approach that you're learning and apply it to find lung cancer early, a huge clinical unmet need, taking airway cells that are far away from where the tumor actually is. And I thought that was also a little crazy, Jerry, but you had me at hello. I had taken that first leap. So I made that second leap. And together over 5 years, we developed a test for finding lung cancer early in our lab. And then came Jerry's craziest idea in, I think, probably 2008. He came into my office and said, Abby, why don't we start a company? If we want to get this test to patients, can't do it from academia. And remember when I said to you, Jerry, I remember very distinctly, I said, Jerry, we can't even spell the word company. How are we going to start a company? And you know what you said back to me, Jerry? We're going to learn. We're going to do this. And that was the beginning of an 8-year roller coaster ride. And where is Ann? I was telling Dave Coleman earlier, if we could get a second chair right now, it would be for Ann. What she's done over a long period of time with support him, and particularly through that 8-year roller coaster ride with that company. You know, you get to know someone doing research together, but you really get to know them when you found a company together. And I'll just share one quick story. This is one of my favorites of that 8-year period. We were going to raise venture capital money early on, where we had no money. We'd never done it before. It was hard to even get into a venture capital office and get an audience. And Jerry, remember this? We finally got in Cambridge to, I will not mention the name because this is public, a venture capital group. And we put together this big scientific deck that Jerry was excited about, like 80-something slides, all the science in the world. We get into the room, and in 3 minutes, we've lost the audience. We know no one cares. And finally, like mercifully, a guy at the back of the room raises his hand, Jerry, and says to us, Dr. Brody, stop the presentation. Answer one question for us. How much money are you looking to raise? And I remember looking over at Jerry and realizing we never really had thought about it. And I started sweating. And I was smart enough back then when I didn't know an answer to keep my mouth shut. But Jerry uttered the famous last words. Well, how much money do you have? We were shown the door 3 minutes later, never got back in that room. But the point is, he was a dreamer. He was an optimist. He believed, and he could make others believe, and he persisted. And you know what? We eventually did raise 2 rounds of venture capital financing. We ran 2 clinical trials published in the New England Journal of Medicine with this biomarker. The test was launched. We were acquired by a public company called Veracyte. That test is in the market today. It's called Percepta, and it's helping thousands of patients a year who have pulmonary nodules. And that was all the dream from Jerry, not from me. This was Jerry, that was the dream. And I don't know if you know this, Jerry, the company told me yesterday that they're planning to launch a nasal version of that test by end of this year. This was always Jerry's big dream. Remember what we used to say, Jerry? The nose knows. That's what nose knows. And you know, this was 2016 when our company was acquired. And I have to say the last 5 years, I haven't interacted as much with you, Jerry, and I miss you terribly. But you've always been there for me in every big decision. Becoming Cancer Center Director under Karen, joining J&J a few years ago. You always were there to help me take the leap, to take the risk, to believe in myself. So from the bottom of my heart, Jerry, thank you, not just on my behalf, but behalf of that ocean of people, all of them online right now, who you influenced in such a profound way, who wouldn't be where they are today without you. You're a unique visionary leader. I was thinking about it on the ride over, Jerry. What differentiates you is not the vision, Jerry. It's your ability to influence others to believe in that vision, to take that leap with you. You are widely loved, not just in this room, online, deeply loved. And I know everyone online wishes they could be there with you in person today here. But I love you, Jerry, and everything I've done till now and everything I will do from here on in is because of you. You'll always be a part of me, and I can't think of a better tribute for you than this chair. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you to everyone in this institution, Karen, Dave, Jay, David, thank you for making this happen. And Jay, congratulations. I'm so happy that you are the first inaugural chair.
So next, I'd like to introduce Karen Brody to come and say a few words.
Thank you. My sisters, Marion and Lisa, and I would like to thank the Pulmonary Center and BU School of Medicine and the many friends, family, and colleagues who've chosen to honor our father's legacy through their presence here and their gifts to the Jerome Brody Endowed Fund. It makes us so proud that our father's lifetime of research and teaching are being recognized through this professorship. Dad didn't talk much about his work while we were growing up, but his passion and hard work were evident to us. He didn't like to bring work home with him, but he did bring home some lonely fellows and residents who had nowhere to go for holiday dinners. And he would sometimes bring home mice and rats who had done their duty in the lab and had nowhere else to go. He was as much a teacher at home as he was at work. Our dad never would tell us answers to questions. He would, instead, he helped us find the answers for ourselves. Our dad has always been very modest about his accomplishments. He never bragged or boasted about himself. Dad's always told us that he doesn't like pomp and circumstance. Forgive me for lifting and modifying a quote. What you leave behind is not the awards, plaques, lists of journal articles and books written, but what is woven into the lives of others. We know Jerry's accomplishments were not only achieved through his technical skills, but also through his patience, caring, mentorship, humor, and love. And these are what have been and will continue to be woven into the lives of Jerry's colleagues, friends, and family. Thank you. We love you.
I'd next like to introduce Jerry's brother, Alan. You're on.
Well, you see this lab coat? This lab coat belonged to our father, another great doctor. So I'm not a real doctor, nor do I play one on TV. But my brother, as you've heard, is one hell of a doctor and one hell of a person. I also want to thank the BU School of Medicine and David Coleman, chairman of the BU School of Medicine, president of the Evans Medical Foundation, for establishing the Jerome Brody MD Professorship in Pulmonary Medicine. As the longest serving director of the Pulmonary Center, he saw BU as his second home. He loved the work that he did, and he loved the people he worked with. Now, in Jerry's other life, he's been a great, loving father, grandfather, husband, uncle, brother. In the old days when he was attending the University of Illinois, he also had a very prestigious title. To many classmates, he was known as Beer Belly Brody. I won't get into his prowess as a fly fisherman, but we did fish on the Roaring Fork River in Colorado, and he was known as the person to have caught the smallest rainbow trout ever recorded. I love you. You are the best brother I could have. And so the things said here earlier, it's not just you, but you remind me of our father. And so I just want to say I love you. And you're the best big brother I've ever had. Also, congratulations to Jay Mizgerd on being selected as the first, what are you, Jay?
Jerome S. Brody Professor.
That's it?
Thank you. I'd next like to introduce Anne's kids, Lee and David Weintraub.
Hello, I'm David, Jerry's stepson, and we just want to say thank you. We're going to piggyback on our uncle and our sister, just saying thank you for everyone making this happen. Nice and
And I'm Jerry's stepdaughter, Leah, and while we both had the pleasure of working in Jerry's lab one summer, not sure if we did much useful, but we did have that pleasure. We wanted to start more at home. From the very first moment we met Jerry, he encouraged scientific inquiry in our lives. In high school, when I was running late for the tea in the morning, or at least very stressed out that I was going to be late for school from running late, Jerry would often go out of his way and drive me all the way to school. And instead of letting me wallow in my stress, which would have been probably very easy to do, he always engineered a conversation with really authentic, interesting, deep questions about what I was learning in school, whether talking through the pundit squares about our family gene pool, or just letting me marvel the joy and coolness of the different sizes of infinity. Those conversations were not only full of new ideas for me to absorb, but most importantly, grounded me. In approaching the world with curiosity and joy, as a student, as a human, and now as a middle school math teacher. And hopefully as a mom to my baby guy. Jerry's contributions to science have been so profound because it knows no boundaries. Every car is a classroom, every human he encounters is a science colleague, and every conversation inspires further scientific pursuits in those lucky enough to spend any time with him.
My sister and I are criers. So I might go through a similar experience. But in the same theme of scientific inquiry, Jerry came into our lives when I was 4 and Leah was 8. And at our first meeting, I had a very inquisitive young science mind. And the one scientific question that I had for Jerry was, how old are you? And although this was a very long time ago, I have this image of Jerry laughing, answering me with a smile, and then of course a very honest and thoughtful response, of which I can't remember, but I'm sure it was great. From that time on, Jerry proved time and time again that all questions were on the table. As Karen said, not necessarily to answer them, but to engage with them. And thankfully, as I grew up, I think my interest broadened from knowing people's ages to more academic and social interests, all of which Jerry welcomed and always found time to engage with me on all topics. He would always listen closely to all my ideas and pushed me to think critically and compassionately. And it wasn't until I was much older, or even until now, that I fully grasped the full the full impact that Jerry had, not only on my own mind, but those many others through his research, mentorship, as I was saying, and scholarship. And I think this honor today for him just justly recognizes the contributions that he's had throughout his career, his lifelong devotion to science, and the practice of graciously and earnestly taking on all questions of the world around him, how big or small that they may seem. So congratulations, Jerry. I'm sorry we're a little bit of a mess.
Online in the chat, somebody said we're all go to the criers.
Should they want to? Should Jerry just say thank you? We gonna have, of course, yeah,
Jerry, do you want to come up and?
and just say thank you, but people can see, because I don't think they can see.
Yeah, because I think people on Zoom can't see.
So let's just, we can just say thank you. Can I say that?
Yes, let me stand up first. That's the hardest part.
The people on Zoom, we're bringing our guest of honor, one of our two guests of honor up here so you can say hello.
This is so weird. We just are so grateful, and as my kids know, I'm a crier too, which is why I didn't want to speak, tonight, but we're just grateful and Jerry and I have been together 29 years now, and just the BU, I went to BU medical school, so my sister has been here at my graduation, so she was here many years ago. So I have just fond memories of BU, and I just one of the luckiest people around to have met Jerry. I want to just say thank you. You have to look at the camera though.
Hello out there.
I think they're
What?
that's all.
That's all I need to do.
Yeah.
Hey, I have a whole.
Sense of humor.
I think we're gonna sit down and
Everyone, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you. So our next speaker will be Dr. Matt Jones, who is a faculty member in the Pulmonary Center and also directs our graduate program in molecular and translational medicine. Dr. Jones is on Zoom, so we'll direct everyone's attention to the Zoom screen.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Dave. I really feel honored and touched and, thrilled today to be introducing Jay Mizgerd. For those of you who don't know, I was actually Jay's first postdoc way back in 2003 when he just started out as assistant professor at Harvard School of Public Health. When he first told me about this Brody professorship, I couldn't have felt happier for the BU community, our Pulmonary Center, and I'm so proud that Jay really is the inaugural professor. So let's go back to the beginnings. There's a common theme with the mice, and Jay's love for science and research actually started out in undergrad at Amherst College, way out in the wilderness, and his mentor had him out chasing wild mice in cornfields for their behavioral studies. From then on, he was hooked with science and earned his Doctor of Science at Harvard School of Public Health in the lab at Joe Brain, where he studied the mechanisms by which neutrophils kill bacteria in the lungs. After defending, he then joined Claire Dorshuk's lab, which was just down the hall. And he expanded his interest from neutrophil antimicrobial activities to the signaling hubs that kept neutrophils in the air spaces. He quickly became an independent investigator. He continued this work and he looked at transcriptional regulation of early response cytokines like TNF-alpha and interleukin-1 and transcriptional controls that regulate these cytokines like NF-kappa B and STAT3. Jay continued to expand his interests when I joined the lab, and we started looking at microRNAs and post-transcriptional control mechanisms of cytokines and host defense. Lee Quinton soon after joined the group as well, and Jay expanded even more so, and he started looking at the lung and the liver axis and how they speak to one another during infections. In more recent years, you can see the common theme here is Jay's expansiveness. Jay's program expanded to heterotypic immunity, which is really how exposures to pathogens early on in our life can influence how the immune system responds to distinct organisms later on. This involves looking at how adaptive immune cells like the memory T and B cells seed the lung and shape our defense responses to infections across different age ranges and immune experiences. This has also really led to insights into the tremendous variability of responses and phenotypes we see with the coronavirus that we see now in humans, and in regards to their previous exposures to less virulent endemic strains of the coronavirus. So you know, these are Jay's interests and love for science, and they've really led to so many successes. I really can't possibly discuss, you know, and bring up all of Jay's accomplishments in such a short period of time, but I'll go through some highlights that really help demonstrate, you know, his passion for science, and that passion has been met with tremendous success. Over a period of 3 decades, Jay has been productively pumping out scientific publications. He's got over 100 now. These are in high-packed journals, New England Journal of Medicine, Journal of Experimental Medicine, JCI, Mucosal Immunology, Nature Cell Biology, Nature Communications, and many, many others. He's been independently funded since 2003 with his first R01 on NF-kappa B and innate immunity in the lungs. And since then, it's been alphabet soup of NIH grant designations, our countless R01s and R56, T32, R61, and in R35, which is actually a NIH Outstanding Investigator Award, whose intention is to give a long-standing support for our best investigators so that they can continue their program of excellence. This is such an award. It's, you know, I'd also like to say it's important to note that as scientists, we don't just publish, write grants, stay cooped up within the walls of our labs. Where Jay really shines more is through his influence. Jay's sphere of influence really is worldwide. He is mission driven in the global fight against lung infection morbidity and mortality. He's dead set against the idea that pneumonia is simply, Jay can't stand this term, but old man's best friend, which was a term that was attributed to William Osler, one of the founders of Hopkins, and wrote in his book, The Principles and Practices of Medicine. This was published back in 1892. And the term meant that in aging, pneumonia-related deaths are simply unavoidable. We can't do anything about it. And Jay's stance is that we don't have to accept that. We can do something about it. So along those lines, in 2008, Jay brought people together around the world by founding the Gordon Research Conference on the Biology of Acute Respiratory Infection. He literally, he's invited literally around the world to give talks all the time on his science. Just this past year, he gave the President's Lecture for Boston University, which is an annual lecture viewed by thousands of people. He manages countless collaborations worldwide, and close to home in our BU community has shaped the lives of so many trainees. You'd think that with all of this activity, Jay would have little time outside of research, just his research-related activities. However, he spends a great deal of time on the education of our trainees and students. Jay co-directs a PhD course called Lung Biology and Pneumonia Disease and Pulmonary Disease. It's one of the most popular ones here offered by GMS. He provides many lectures throughout the year, one of which he's actually going to give tomorrow for us in our colloquium. He's constantly teaching at the American Thoracic Society conference through lectures and post-grad courses. This meeting's huge, draws about 20,000 scientists and trainees annually. For his own trainees, Jay's mentored over 12 graduate students, 14 postdocs, research assistants, visiting professors, medical students, even high school students. Jay's just simply helped countless of his trainees learn from him and garner their own support and independence, as both myself and Lee Quinton are evidence in academia. So many of his trainees have earned F-31s, which are pre-doctoral fellowships, jobs in industries, such as his two most recent graduate students, Kim Barker and Ahmad Arafa. And of course, his most senior postdoc, Anakul Shinoy, just earned his first K-99, which is a pathway mechanism to independence. And these are just a small sampling of the size of and the positive impact Jay has had on the lives of whom he has interacted. Outside of the grants, number of publications, or the number of invited talks, I think an often unspoken metric of success is how a leader influences the lives of those around them. Jay fosters a balanced culture of curiosity, scientific rigor, insightfulness, and hard work, but it's balanced with reflection, life accommodation, and most importantly, fun. It's a unique and slightly poetic approach, one that I'm sure he remembers I razzed him about as a postdoc. He mentioned he liked to kind of unplug at night and read poetry, and I thought, what's wrong with this guy? He needs to get a better Xbox. But after I grew up a little bit, I can understand his wisdom and seeking ways to reconcile differing perspectives and of viewing the world in new and creative ways. It parallels what we do with discoveries and in research. So, I invite you to, visit the lab down in the R2 building, and you'll clearly see that the people are happy and they enjoy their research. A lot of what we do, a lot of our research is really difficult. 95% of the time, you're wrong. You spend, all this time submitting, your precious baby of a paper. It gets torn apart. Grant scores plummet because of the infamous third reviewer, and so on and so forth. It's tough being faculty alone, let alone a trainee. But I can truly say that Jay is a tremendous. He's a source of tremendous positive energy and inspiration, and he's always there to support his lab, those in the Pulmonary Center, and of course, those at the med school. Jay is a eternal optimist. How else, could you really classify a Washington football team fan deep in Patriots territory? We're familiar with wins, Jay not so much, but yet, hope springs eternal every draft season. Jay loves his medical history, and particularly how scientific discoveries are made. Our understandings, has come so far, and there's, he really has a profound respect for those who have helped us get here. Jay is also a creature of habit, down to the level of ordering the same OZ and vegetarian chili combo every day from Checkers downstairs. So, but I get it. It's about structure and maintaining focus. We all have a ritual, but Jay just so deeply cares about his trainees and colleagues, and do whatever he can to help them succeed and thrive in their own independent endeavors. So in summary, I can really think of no person more meritorious on all levels of a scientist, a humanist, a family man of the Jerry Brody Professorship than Jay. Since becoming the director of the Pulmonary Center, Jay's continued to build upon Jerry's vision, his spirit, and expand, a culture of collegiality, innovation, and discovery. Jay is that uncommon, unique, that true mix of scientific drive, leadership, poise, and strides with that kind of poetic balance to life. So with that, I invite you to welcome Jay as our first Jerry Brody Professor at BU. We're really proud of you.
Very much, Matt. It's my pleasure to welcome to the front of this new stage, the very first Jerry Brody Professor of Pulmonary Medicine, Dr. Jay Mizgerd.
Thank you all very much. That's a lot of really beautiful words. I feel so honored. I usually extemporize, but today I actually wrote down my words, and I'll have to actually do a lot of reading today because I want to try to do this right. This is a very important occasion to me. What I want to do most of this time I have is to express thanks. I feel an enormous sense of gratitude to be named the first Jerome S. Brody, MD, Professor of Pulmonary Medicine. First, I'd like to say a few words about Jerry. This professorship exists to honor Jerry Brody, and it's a lasting and well-deserved tribute to him and his accomplishments. If I had to use one word to describe Jerry, and it was already used by Avi, it would be visionary. Jerry's science contributions were broad and deep. His earliest studies, beginning in the 1960s, helped establish fundamentals of respiratory physiology, including gas exchange, adaptation to altitude, and health consequences of cigarette smoking. He innovated animal models for lung biology studies, which included groundbreaking pneumonectomy investigations, and the shocking discovery the lungs could regrow, which really began the entire field of pulmonary regenerative medicine. And he did all the way at that back in the 1970s. His interest in lung tissue regeneration sparked a passion in Jerry for defining the normal processes by which lungs develop. And then again, he was way ahead of his time by positing back then, years before the rest of us realized it, that how the lung develops in utero is really key to preventing pulmonary disease in adults. He elucidated new cell types, such as the lipofibroblast in the alveolar septae and how that influences alveolar epithelial cell differentiation. He embraced molecular biology and all technology changes as they came through the years. In the 80s and 90s, he was at the forefront of figuring out how gene expression was important to pulmonary development and dynamic processes like disease. And then he used that, as Avi described, in some of the studies that Avi and Jerry did together to really found the field of transcriptomics in the lungs, the bronchoscopy samples from human patients. He's basically been a leader and a forefront in all things scientific when it comes to the lungs. In the American Thoracic Society, he founded the journal, spearheaded that creation of the journal of the American Journal of Respiratory and Cell and Molecular Biology. And he was one of the first co-editors of that journal. And that journal is doing better every year, 30 years later. Like everything else that Jerry builds, it grows and thrives and survives. He founded and helps found the Pulmonary Center with Gordon Snyder. And he was the longest serving director for more than 25 years. And he built it from a smallish unit of clinicians with some biochemistry interests into a large, diverse, and multidisciplinary medical science enterprise that's focused on research and discovery and training. And related to training, Jerry envisioned and then created a lung biology training program. And he got that funded by the NIH back in 1975. And it's been continuously funded ever since then. What Jerry built and grew and envisioned back in 1975, he brought together by saying, clinicians and MDs should be trained with basic scientists and PhDs to work together to understand lung biology and pulmonary disease. And it's the same ethos that survives today. David Center and I were co-PIs on this same grant that Jerry created from 2011 to 2021. And now Daryl Cotton and I will be co-PIs on it. It just got renewed this year for 2021 to 26. So it'll be 50 full years, the longest running grant that we have, and it's all thanks to Jerry. Jerry's vision is our path. I also want to very sincerely thank all of you who have supported this dream of creating a Jerry Brody Professorship. At least 80 different donors already have stepped up to establish this here at BU, and it includes multiple members of the Brody family, and I'm so grateful to all of you. You're inspirational with your generosity. I've really enjoyed working, especially with Ann and with Alan, to get to know both of you as we worked together to make this come true. It's something that was so important to all of us. I also really want to thank Dave Coleman, especially since we're doing thanks right now. Dave has been a game-changing commitment to the Jerry Brody Professorship, and this couldn't happen without Dave Coleman's belief in this and the importance of this. And Dave has been a great chair of medicine. He's been a true friend and ally to Jerry and to me and to the Pulmonary Center. And I'm really sorry for all of us that Dave Coleman is going to be stepping down as chair in the near future, because he'll be very greatly missed. But I'm really very happy for you, Dave. And I wish you joy and fulfillment in your coming roles, both the new ones and the renewed ones. I want to thank my family who are here on Zoom today, but not here in person. That includes especially my parents and my wife and my children. My parents, Ann and Joe Mizgerd, were both physicians. I and my sister Kathy learned a tremendous amount from my parents. My father, Joseph Bernard Mizgerd, was a passionate pulmonologist, so the apple didn't fall too far from the tree. I witnessed him at work through much of my childhood. I was a volunteer in the hospital where he worked before I was old enough to have paying jobs. And my dad loved his career as a physician, and he was deeply committed and connected to his patients, as well as to the physicians and respiratory therapists with whom he worked. He brought his job home with him. You know, Karen said that Jerry didn't do that much, but my dad definitely did. He brought his job home with him, but in the best possible ways. He shared stories of triumphs and struggles with patients. He always demonstrated that service to others was paramount. And he often discussed the lungs and why he loved them with us. Even, you know, explaining how pulmonary functions worked and why it mattered to very young children. I'm so pleased he's here Zooming with us today. My mom, Ann Friedman Mizgerd, passed away recently. She was a pediatrician with a master's in public health. A pediatrician, that's right. Beautiful baby. She endeavored to make a difference at the population level and to work for the benefit of underserved individuals. She took care of children in often very difficult situations through primary care and public health clinics in Baltimore and Virginia. Both of my parents always emphasized that work can and should matter, and that doing work that matters to you and to others is personally rewarding, fulfilling, and fun. And because of them, I grew up aspiring to have a job that I love, and I feel very lucky that I do. I thank my wife, Lou Mizgerd. She and I have been close since we were in college together. Before I knew anything about research or science or had considered a career in academics, every important professional or personal decision I faced as an adult has required consultation with Lou. She knows me better than anyone. She's smarter and far nicer than I am, so that I always need and want her help. I thank my two boys, now men, Bill and Clay Mizgerd. Their births were the happiest 2 days of my life. And being a father, being a good father to them. Father is what it's all about. That matters more to me than anything else. I thank my major scientific mentors, Joe Brain and Claire Dorshuk. Joe was my role model as I pursued my doctoral studies. He was explosively curious, eager to let the science take us in new directions. He was always encouraging, and importantly also recognized when extra encouragement might be needed. He was really key to guiding me during the early years of the AIDS pandemic and helping me become really interested and focused on lung infections, which continues through today. Claire Dorshuk was my role model as my postdoc mentor. I was so inspired by Claire and wishing and hoping that someday I might become the sort of enthusiastic expert that she is. She and I spent countless hours huddled together over a microscope where she managed to make two-dimensional static images of tissue slices come to life for me as windows into intact lungs in the midst of kinetic processes. And in addition to the science I learned from Claire, I've never known anybody who's as dedicated to her trainees as Claire Dorshak is. She made all of us in her group feel that her topmost priority was our success and happiness. And she provided an incredibly warm and supportive environment. It's because of Claire that I became dedicated to lung immunology. And then I want to thank all of my mentees. Matt Jones was one of them and nicely highlighted my relationships with my mentees already. I'm really pleased to say that there are too many of them to list individually, already more than 26, so I'll thank them as a group. But when I began doing scientific research, I didn't appreciate how exciting and rewarding mentorship would be. And unexpectedly, it turned out to be the most nourishing of my professional activities. I learned tremendously from every mentee, trying to understand them and their ambitions and interests and helping them hone their scientific acumen helps them, but it also really helps me and it helps our research, and it yields the professional accomplishments that feel the most satisfying and lasting to me. I think many great faculty colleagues, again, way too many to list, but I'd particularly like to highlight David Center, who's an outstanding partner in pulmonary leadership here at BU. Karen Ampman, who as Dean exemplifies a fair and transparent model of leadership. And then both Matt Jones and Lee Quinton, who are especially notable as mentees, who then transitioned to becoming independent faculty colleagues and are now longstanding friends and collaborators. Collaboration is a wonderful part about being at BU. It's an extraordinarily collaborative environment. I think it's unmatched. I visit a lot of medical schools and I don't think anywhere collaborates the way we do here at BU. I counted up the BU faculty with whom I've officially collaborated on papers or grants or both, and I find so far there are at least 56 BU collaborators I have, faculty collaborators, and I'm certain that number is going to continue to grow. BU collaborators are friends now as well as colleagues, and they make coming to work a joy every day. There's many things I appreciate about being a scientist and a professor. Scientific research is inherently stimulating. The main thrust of what we do is trying to solve a never-ending string of intellectual puzzles, and the quest to understand is a thrill. The way science is constantly changing is a blessing, and it's very helpful to someone who gets restless like I do. And intellectual freedom with full abilities to choose which directions to take and how we can carve a path productively in those directions it's invigorating. But most importantly, as I hope my words have emphasized, and really it's been the theme of all of the talks today, it's all about the people. And academics involves many awesome interactions with many awesome individuals, including mentors and mentees and colleagues and collaborators. The people are the most important part of our job, and academics is a unique and special brand of people. I think Jerry Brody would agree with me on this. During a lunch I had with Jerry early this year and with Ann and Karen at the same lunch, I asked Jerry to look back over his career and share what he valued most. And he thought for a few minutes, but not a few minutes, for a few seconds. He's a quick thinker. And then he replied with 5 simple words: having fun while helping people. And that's what Jerry thought of while looking back over his career, having fun while helping people. And as always, I feel inspired to follow in Jerry Brody's footsteps. And I hope to have fun while helping people as he did so well. So to conclude, this professorship is the most important, most meaningful, and most personally significant honor I've ever received. And I thank you all for being here today and for sharing this moment together.
That concludes the formal part of our program today. We do have a few minutes for comments, either from people on Zoom or here in the room. Maybe I'll just kick things off by asking Dr. David Center to make a couple of comments. David? Yeah, maybe people will hear you better.
I don't know what to say, actually. This is a wonderful, wonderful occasion. So fabulous to have Jerry appropriately recognized, and wonderful to have Jay as the first professor. Maybe I'll tell you the day I met Jerry Brody. I think in 1973 or 1974, and Gordon Snyder had offered me a fellowship in pulmonary medicine, and he said, you have to interview with these two people. And one of them was Ed Gensler, and I won't tell you the story of interviewing with Ed Gensler for those of you. But I had an interview with Jerry, and I didn't know who he was or what he was about. And so I went to Index Medicus library and looked up Index Medicus. Those of you who don't know what that is, Google it and you'll find out that it was the predecessor of PubMed, and it was not only labor intensive, but it was time intensive. And we had to go year by year. And so I thought I'd look up Jerry's papers so I'd know what to talk about in my interview. And I only went back 2 years to 1971, and I found this paper that he had written with Aaron Fisher and Arthur Du Bois. Arthur Du Bois was one of the most famous pulmonary physiologists ever. And it was entitled, and I haven't looked at it in decades, something like Pneumonomegaly, Evidence for Postnatal Adult Lung Growth in the Adults. And basically, Jerry had taken and studied individuals, and I'm bringing this up because it was the theme of what Jerry's done did for the next 50 or 40 years. And he actually studied individuals with pituitary tumors who had increased growth hormone. And it was well known that many organs expanded and got bigger in individuals who had acromegaly, the disease. But no one had ever studied the lung. And what he showed was that men with acromegaly had big lungs. Their lungs grew bigger in adulthood. Actually, women did not, for reasons that are still not understood. And he also went to do the controls in individuals who had high levels of growth hormone from birth. And those are the giants that you see in the circus. And those who had no growth hormone, the individuals who were what were called ateliotic dwarfs. And they had proportional lungs to their height. But the acromegalics actually had lungs that grew. Why was that important? Because that's the holy grail of lung disease. You have injury and either repair or no repair. And if you don't repair well, can you grow new lung? And that's what Jerry did for the rest of his career. Early on, he did a sabbatical in Cusco in Peru, in which he studied individuals who grew up at high altitude to determine why their lungs were big and whether or not that was something that could be harnessed at sea level and individuals with lung growth. And he did a number of animal models, and he developed, as Avi mentioned earlier, the first program in lung epithelial biology, which was really one in developmental biology, in which he wanted to determine whether or not individuals we could grow new lungs or repair lungs that were already injured. And that was the forerunner of our Center for Regenerative Medicine and a number of other things that he did over all those years. And his vision at that point, 1971, is now coming to fruition in 2021, 50 years later. And that's what I call an individual who has made a mark on the field and a mark on the world. Someone who sees 50 years into the future and understands what it will be like and whether or not it's possible. And that's what Jerry did back then. Jerry, I also want to tell you, Jerry had another incredible knack, and that was matching people who were appropriate to be together. And I don't know how he did it and how we pulled it together, but he matched me with my first postdoctoral fellow, who I had never met, and he assigned to me when I became a faculty member, and that person became one of my best friends for the rest of my life. And so thank you, Jerry, for all the contributions you've made over the years, for the vision, for all the wonderful times we spent together screwing up things that we should have done right the first time, and all the other wonderful times that we spent, including I'll tell some people's stories later on about our trips to the Soviet Union. And Jay, congratulations again. I can't think of anyone I'd rather have as the first professor. What a wonderful tribute.
Thank you, David.
Anyone on Zoom want to make any comments? We have just a few minutes left, then we'll have to wrap up.
I guess if I could just for a second, this is Lee Quinton here. I don't know if anyone can see me. I'll keep it quick. You know, I not only is Jay, you know, first of all, what a wonderful event for two icons. This is just really, really wonderful. And I'm so happy to have been able to see this tonight. And in the case of Jay, you know, my postdoc mentor, you know, I just want to say not only has he taught a lot of us how to think like scientists, which I know is one of his major goals. And, you know, a lot of his mentees or former mentees are on this call right now. So I know I speak for a lot of us. But, you know, Jay's been a mentor in other ways, too. He's taught us how to be husbands. He's taught us how to be fathers. He's taught us how to be friends. And I want to acknowledge that part of him because it's meant a huge difference to me. And I know that embodies the spirit that Jerry has brought to the center and to the school as well. So I just want to, like I said, acknowledge the fact that these kind of traits really extend beyond our thinking like scientists and really enter our family lives. My kid's running around behind me right now. You know, and as an anecdote, I saw one of Jay's former postdocs a week ago in New Hampshire. She's on this call right now, Linnell, and we were having a random conversation, nothing to do with Jay. And the kids are running around going crazy. And she said, you know what, Lee, Jay once told me that kids represent the highest highs and the lowest lows. And I thought that was so cool that she's sitting there quoting Jay when we're not having a talk about it. So speaking of the kids, there they are. But thank you, both of you, for being such icons and such inspirations. I really appreciate it. And congratulations.
I'd like to say something. David, if I can, my name is Wellington Cardozo. I am actually calling as one of the drops into the ocean that Avi mentions in terms of how it's the influence, the strong influence that Jerry did in our lives. I'm calling from Columbia University, where I am right now, but I say that in fact, I grew up since from the 1990 when I came to BU and left almost 20 years later. And it is wonderful to, in fact, be part of this community of Jerry's, I suppose, and I can say family. First of all, I would like to thank Jay very much for the idea and the very hard work that he did to actually install this professorship. This is not easy. And I thank him for the idea of honoring Jerry on this. I just would like to very briefly say one thing that people haven't touched, which is the Woods Hole conferences that, in fact, Jerry put together and that lasted for many years. And how strong is that these conferences were for the pulmonary field, because essentially there was very little pulmonary. The idea that he had, as usual, his forward vision, was that we should mix at the least as possible with the pulmonary people and a lot with the others who were doing science, hardcore science, so then that we could incorporate and have new ideas. And this is something that is incredible. The other thing that I would like to, in fact, in this respect, to say that, again, I have to say something that Avi actually put, how crazy he was. I was a trainee in 1991. I had just done 6 months of work, and then suddenly he says, you are going to speak at this Woods Hole conference. And I said, all right, whatsoever, well, that's fine. And then when I saw that there was a poster with the names of the people who were Connie Sepko, Doug Melton, Lewis Wolpert. And I said, are you crazy, Jerry? I'm just a trainee. And essentially, it is the confidence that he actually puts on people. And I said, how am I going to do it? And he just says, just to speak loud and clear. That I had to do. So again, how it is that you raise people, how it is that you provide guidance, confidence, and in fact you create an environment that it is a family-like, because I saw his kids actually growing up. And it is wonderful to see and to be part of this community. And in fact, I'm also very honored to have been invited for this year's lecture, the Jerry Brody's lecture. So thank you very much, Jerry. We definitely love you. Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more comment. Anyone on Zoom or in the room want to offer other comment? Okay. If not,
I have one final comment to Jerry comment. I want to first congratulations to Jay. What a well-deserved honor. And my brief Jerry comment is just one of a typical Jerry story. I'm inspired to be in regenerative medicine because of Jerry. And I was at the time when I was a fellow training and Jerry was our director, I was with my mentor, Alan Feiner. We're looking for new models, and Jerry suggested we check out this, the way the lung grows after pneumonectomy. And I thought he seemed to know a lot about this model. I found it very interesting. And slowly I worked my way back through the literature and came to the original papers that launched this, this key model, which continues to be the seminal model of lung regeneration, called post-pneumonectomy lung growth. And the two original papers in 1975 and 1973, one was a 2-author paper with Jerry Brody's name on it, and the other one in JCI had one single author on it. It was Jerome S. Brody. And I was in shock, and I ran into Jerry's office and I said, all the conversations we had about this model, you never told. I found the original paper, you founded the field, you created the model, you created this field. Why did you never tell me it was you? And Jerry just said, oh, ancient history, you know, you got to look forward. That's in the past. So I think that just sums up Jerry, just humility. He couldn't be bothered about taking credit or the past. He just always wanted to look to the future and what was best and would move the field forward. And credit was the last thing he dreamed of. And so this is what you get, Jerry, a lot of credit, a lot of people expressing love and thanks, even though that's the last thing you expected from any of us. So congratulations and thank you for all you did for me and everybody else on the call. Thank you.
thank you. So I will just close by reminding the family and anyone who's interested that this event has been recorded. Any of you who want to enter additional comments in the chat, please do so. We will present those to Jerry and his family. So please, we'll keep the Zoom open for a few minutes so you have time to enter additional comments if you'd like. I do wish to close by joining with Jay and thanking all the members of the pulmonary community and Department of Medicine and members of Jerry's family for helping make this professorship possible through their generosity. I also want to make sure that Jay Mizgerd knows how proud we are that Jay, you're now the first Jerome S. Brody Professor of Pulmonary Medicine, and how proud we are to have you and your example in our department. And I'll close by just saying thank you to Jerry Brody for helping us dream, helping us aspire, and having the confidence in so many of us in this community in our ability to make the world a better place. Jerry, your many gifts continue to endure in this department. Thank you very much.